Welcome to Coffin Confessor, where we reveal the darkest secrets people swore to take to their graves. I'm your host, bringing you true confessions that expose the hidden truths behind ordinary lives. The kind of secrets that destroy families, end careers, and change everything forever. Today's story is from a female lawyer in Chicago who made one small compromise that led to the complete destruction of her marriage, her career, and her moral foundation. What started as professional attraction became a devastating affair with her criminal client. And now she's 6 months pregnant with his baby while her husband believes the child is his own. Support us by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell. It helps us bring you more of these powerful confessions that reveal the hidden darkness in seemingly perfect lives. Now let's dive into a confession that will make you question everything you think you know about professional ethics, marriage, and the price of betrayal. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and I'm about to confess the most devastating secret I've ever kept. I'm a criminal defense attorney in downtown Chicago, someone who built her entire career on ethics, truth, and doing what's right. For 8 years, I've walked into courtrooms with my head held high, defending clients while maintaining my moral compass. At least, that's who I used to be. The woman staring back at me in that bathroom mirror was someone I barely recognized. 6 months pregnant, married to a wonderful man who thinks this baby is his, and carrying the child of my criminal client who's about to stand trial for crimes worse than I ever imagined. How do you tell the people you love that everything they believe about you is built on lies? Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where every single path leads to destruction? Where the choice you made months ago has grown into something so massive that it threatens to crush everyone you care about? Because that's where Victoria is right now. This isn't just about an affair, though that's how it started. This is about how one moment of weakness can snowball into a catastrophe that destroys multiple lives. It's about the lies we tell ourselves to justify the unjustifiable, and how professional boundaries exist for reasons we don't understand until we cross them. My husband David is a pediatric surgeon, one of those genuinely good people who saves children's lives for a living. We've been married for 8 years, and for the past 3, we've been desperately trying to have a baby. Fertility treatments, scheduled intimacy, monthly disappointments that left us both emotionally drained. Our marriage had become a carefully choreographed dance around ovulation calendars and pregnancy tests. But this pregnancy test? This one was different. This one represented the complete destruction of everything I'd built my life around. See, the father of this baby isn't my husband. It's Marcus Rivera, my client, a man facing federal charges for money laundering, who walked into my office 6 months ago and turned my world upside down. A man who I thought I knew, who I thought I loved, but who I've recently discovered might be capable of things that make my betrayal look like a minor offense. The irony is suffocating. I'm a criminal defense attorney who became a criminal herself. I help people navigate legal consequences while facing consequences I never saw coming. Every day, I sit across from clients and advise them about honesty, about taking responsibility for their actions, about the importance of truth in the legal system. And every day, I go home to my husband and lie directly to his face about the most fundamental aspects of our life together. David thinks we're finally going to be parents together. He's been planning our child's future, painting the nursery, reading parenting books with the enthusiasm of someone whose deepest wish is finally coming true. He has no idea that the baby I'm carrying belongs to a man who might be guilty of far worse crimes than financial fraud. Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? A single decision that seemed small at the time, but ended up rewriting your entire life story? I'd love to hear about it in the comments, because right now, I'm drowning in the consequences of mine. The question isn't just how I ended up here, it's what happens next. In 3 months, this baby will be born. David will be in that delivery room, holding my hand, believing he's witnessing the birth of his child. Marcus will likely be in federal prison, and I'll be holding a baby who represents every lie I've told, every boundary I've crossed, every principle I've abandoned. It was March 15th. I remember the exact date because it's when my life split into 2 distinct parts: before Marcus Rivera and after. He walked into my downtown Chicago law office on a Tuesday morning, and from the moment I saw him, I knew I was in trouble. Marcus was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and eyes that seemed to see straight through every professional barrier I'd carefully constructed. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from intelligence, not arrogance. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm but gentle, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine attraction to someone who wasn't my husband. "I need someone who believes in second chances," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. His voice had a slight accent that I later learned came from growing up in Miami with Cuban parents. Someone who understands that good people sometimes make terrible choices. The federal charges against him were serious. The prosecution claimed he'd moved over $12 million through cryptocurrency exchanges for various criminal enterprises. Money laundering on a massive scale, the kind of case that could make or break a legal career. Marcus insisted he was just a blockchain consultant who got caught up in something he didn't fully understand. I should have referred him to another attorney immediately. The case was high profile, complex, and potentially career-defining. But more importantly, I felt drawn to him in a way that violated every professional instinct I developed over 15 years of practicing law. That attraction was exactly why I should have said no. Instead, I said yes. Why do good people make terrible choices? It's a question I've been wrestling with for months now. Psychologists call it moral disengagement, the process by which we convince ourselves that ethical standards don't apply to our specific situation. We create justifications, minimize consequences, and tell ourselves that what we're doing is different, special, necessary. My first justification was professional. This case could establish me as one of Chicago's premier white-collar defense attorneys. The media attention, the complex legal challenges, the opportunity to prove myself against federal prosecutors. It all seemed like the natural next step in my career trajectory. My second justification was personal, though I didn't admit it to myself at the time. My marriage to David had become a carefully managed routine of medical appointments, fertility treatments, and scheduled intimacy. We were like roommates working toward a common goal, rather than lovers sharing a life together. David worked 18-hour days at the hospital, saving children's lives while I fought legal battles for adults who'd made questionable choices. We'd eat dinner together maybe twice a week, usually in exhausted silence, both too drained to maintain real conversation. Our attempts at conceiving had turned intimacy into a clinical process, something we did because the calendar said it was time, not because we desired each other. When was the last time your spouse really listened to you? not just heard your words, but actually engaged with your thoughts and feelings? Marcus represented something I'd forgotten existed, the thrill of intellectual connection with someone who found me genuinely interesting. During our first consultation, he asked about my background, my motivations for becoming a defense attorney, my thoughts on criminal justice reform. He treated me like a person, not just a legal service provider. "You're not what I expected," he told me as our meeting concluded. "Most attorneys I've met seem more interested in billable hours than understanding their clients' stories." I felt myself blush, actually blush, like a teenager receiving her first compliment. That should have been my second warning sign, right after the immediate physical attraction. But instead of heeding those warnings, I rationalized them away. "I believe in getting to know my clients completely," I replied, which wasn't entirely untrue, but wasn't the whole truth either. If this story resonates with you so far, subscribe and hit that like button. It helps more people find these confessions. Taking Marcus's case was my first real compromise, though I didn't recognize it then. I told myself it was about professional growth and legal challenge, but underneath those justifications was something more dangerous. The desire to spend time with someone who made me feel alive again. That compromise would lead to others, each one slightly larger, until I found myself living a double life I never thought possible. The first month was purely professional. At least, that's what I told myself as I dove into Marcus's case with an intensity that surprised even me. I spent long hours analyzing financial records, blockchain transactions, and federal banking regulations. The evidence was circumstantial but damaging, a pattern of cryptocurrency transfers that looked suspicious to investigators but could potentially be explained as legitimate consulting work. Marcus claimed he'd been hired as a blockchain expert, helping businesses navigate the complex world of digital currencies. He insisted he had no knowledge that the funds he was moving came from illegal sources. The prosecution painted him as a criminal mastermind. He presented himself as a naive tech consultant who got in over his head. "They're making me out to be some kind of criminal genius," he said during one of our strategy sessions in April. "But I'm just a guy who understood technology better than the people hiring me." Our meeting started extending later into the evening. I rationalized this as necessary. Complex federal cases require thorough preparation, and Marcus's situation demanded my complete attention. When he began bringing coffee to our sessions, remembering exactly how I liked it with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, I told myself he was just being considerate. When he started asking about my day, actually listening to my responses with genuine interest, I convinced myself this was part of building the attorney-client relationship necessary for effective representation. "I need to understand my client completely," I told myself. "This is just thorough preparation, classic compartmentalization." I was separating my growing personal feelings from my professional responsibilities, convincing myself they were unrelated when they were becoming dangerously intertwined. Marcus had a way of making me feel valued that I hadn't experienced in years. Unlike David, who spoke in medical terminology I barely understood, Marcus explained complex financial concepts in ways that made me feel intelligent and capable. He asked for my opinions, challenged my thinking, and treated my insights as valuable contributions rather than just legal services. "You're brilliant," he told me one evening in May as we reviewed witness statements. "I can see why you have such a reputation in this city." The compliment hit me like a physical force. When was the last time someone had called me brilliant? When was the last time David had looked at me with genuine admiration rather than tired affection? The emotional affair was in full swing by this point, though I refused to call it that. We were sharing personal stories, discussing our hopes and fears, creating an intimacy that had nothing to do with legal strategy. I learned about his childhood in Miami, his parents' struggle to build a life in America, his dreams of using technology to help people build wealth. He learned about my frustrations with fertility treatments, my feelings of failure as a wife, my sense that David and I were drifting apart despite our shared goals. When I mentioned the stress of the medical procedures, Marcus offered sympathy without the clinical detachment I'd grown accustomed to at home. "You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are," he said one evening as we reviewed financial records. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning that neither of us acknowledged directly. That should have been the moment I transferred his case to another attorney. Should have been when I remembered my wedding vows, my professional ethics, everything I'd built my identity around. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn by the intensity in his gaze. The night everything changed was a rainy Thursday in late May. We'd been working on his defense strategy when a thunderstorm knocked out the power in my building. The backup generators kept the emergency lighting on, but my office was dim, intimate, charged with the electricity of the storm outside. "This case is consuming my life," I said, more to myself than to him. "Maybe some things are worth being consumed by," he replied, moving closer. In the half-darkness, with the sound of rain against the windows and the weight of months of building tension, he kissed me. I kissed him back, abandoning 8 years of marriage and 15 years of legal ethics in a single moment of weakness. "This is insane," I whispered against his lips. "Sometimes insane is the only thing that makes sense," he replied. Those words became our justification for everything that followed. 3 months of hotel rooms across Chicago, always careful, always paranoid about being discovered. Marcus made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. With him, I wasn't just Victoria the attorney or Victoria the struggling wife. I was simply Victoria, desired and understood. But the psychological cost was immediate and devastating. Psychologists have a term for what I was experiencing: moral injury. It's the deep psychological wound that occurs when we perpetrate acts that violate our fundamental beliefs about right and wrong. I'd built my entire identity around being ethical, trustworthy, someone who did the right thing, even when it was difficult. Now I was living a lie so profound, it threatened to destroy everything I'd worked for. The weight of the deception followed me everywhere. Into courtrooms where I advocated for justice while betraying my marriage. Into my home where David trusted me completely while I planned my next secret meeting. The rationalization patterns became more elaborate with each passing day. I convinced myself that my marriage was already failing, that David and I had grown apart naturally. I told myself that my feelings for Marcus represented real love, not just an escape from my problems. Most dangerously, I began to believe that Marcus was truly innocent, that my emotional investment in him was justified because he was a good man caught in bad circumstances. The evidence suggested otherwise, but love makes us blind to inconvenient truths. I was about to learn just how blind I'd become. Those 3 months were simultaneously the most alive I'd ever felt and the most morally bankrupt period of my life. The intensity of my connection with Marcus was intoxicating. Stolen hours in hotel rooms across the city, text messages sent from courthouse bathrooms, the rush of adrenaline that came from living on the edge of discovery. But the guilt was consuming me from the inside out. Every morning I'd wake up next to David feeling like a monster. He'd kiss my forehead before leaving for the hospital, tell me he loved me, express gratitude for having me in his life. His complete trust in me made everything worse. If he'd been suspicious, if he'd questioned my late nights at the office, or noticed my emotional distance, I might have felt justified in my betrayal. Instead, he was simply David, kind, dedicated, working impossibly long hours to save children's lives while I destroyed our marriage one secret meeting at a time. "You seem stressed lately," he said one evening over dinner. "Maybe we should take a break from trying to conceive. I don't want the pressure to affect your health." His concern for my well-being while I was actively betraying him felt like physical pain. I wanted to confess everything right there, to fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness. Instead, I nodded and agreed, knowing that our attempts at conception had already succeeded, just not with him. The professional crisis was equally devastating. How do you maintain objectivity when you're sleeping with your client? How do you provide effective legal counsel when your judgment is compromised by love? The Illinois rules of professional conduct were clear about conflicts of interest, but they didn't cover the specific situation of falling for someone you're supposed to be defending. I started making mistakes I'd never made before, missing deadlines, forgetting to file motions, losing track of important evidence. My assistant noticed my distraction and started double-checking my work without being asked. Other attorneys in my firm began commenting on my unusual dedication to Marcus's case, wondering why I was spending so much time on a single client. But the worst part was discovering inconsistencies in Marcus's story as I dug deeper into his case. Financial records that didn't align with his claims of ignorance, communications with known criminals that went beyond simple consulting work, bank statements showing personal accounts that had received suspicious transfers. "You told me you only handled technical aspects," I confronted him during a meeting in June. "But these records show direct communication with money laundering operations." His face changed, became guarded in a way I hadn't seen before. "Sometimes you have to communicate with problematic people to understand the scope of what you're dealing with," he said. I was trying to figure out how deep this went. It was the first time I'd caught him in what felt like a deliberate deception, and it shook everything I thought I knew about him. Was the man I was falling in love with actually guilty of the crimes he was accused of? The psychological toll became cyclical and destructive. I'd spend days feeling guilty about David, then escape into Marcus's arms and feel guilty about potentially defending a criminal I was emotionally compromised with. I'd return home to David feeling like a fraud, then go to work the next day questioning whether my client was lying to me about his involvement. Sleep became elusive. I was surviving on maybe 3 hours per night, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. My appetite disappeared, and I started losing weight despite David's concerns about my health. That's when the pregnancy symptoms started. At first, I attributed the nausea to stress and guilt. The exhaustion seemed explained by my insomnia and emotional turmoil. But when my period was late, a horrible possibility began forming in my mind. The pregnancy test confirmed my worst fears. 8 weeks along, which aligned perfectly with a night Marcus and I had spent together at a hotel in River North. The timing was unmistakable. David and I had been following our fertility specialist's schedule religiously, but we'd had no success during that particular window. What would you do in this situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. David's reaction to the pregnancy news was pure joy. 8 years of marriage, 3 years of fertility treatments, countless disappointments, and finally, he believed, we were going to be parents. He cried when I told him, actually cried with happiness, talking about how this was the best day of his life. I locked myself in the bathroom afterward and sobbed for an hour. The man I loved was celebrating becoming a father to a child that wasn't his, while the actual father was facing federal prison time for crimes I was becoming increasingly convinced he'd actually committed. I was 8 weeks pregnant with a criminal's baby, and my husband had no idea his entire world was built on my lies. The doctor's confirmation felt like a verdict. 8 weeks pregnant. The conception date aligned perfectly with that night at the Renaissance Hotel, when Marcus and I had abandoned all caution. While David had been working a 36-hour shift at the hospital, I'd been creating a life with another man. Scheduling prenatal appointments became an exercise in deception. I booked them during lunch breaks, driving to a clinic across town where no one from David's hospital network would recognize me. Cash payments only. I couldn't risk insurance records that might reveal inconsistencies in my story. The doctor was thorough and kind, completely unaware that she was helping me maintain the most devastating lie of my life. "Everything looks healthy," she said during my first appointment. "Your due date is February 12th. Dad must be thrilled." I nodded, unable to speak. Dad was thrilled, just not the right dad. Marcus's reaction when I told him was complicated and heartbreaking. We met at Grant Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the lake like any other couple sharing pregnancy news. Except we weren't any other couple, and this pregnancy represented the potential destruction of multiple lives. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked quietly. "The timing makes it certain," I replied. "David and I were following our fertility schedule exactly. There's a 2-week window where it could only be yours." His face went through a series of emotions: joy, fear, guilt, something that might have been love. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "David thinks it's his. After 3 years of trying, he's over the moon." Marcus took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I want this baby," he said. "I want you." We could figure out a way to be together. The fantasy was tempting. Disappearing somewhere, starting fresh, raising our child together. But reality crashed down immediately. Marcus was facing federal charges. I'd face disbarment if our relationship was discovered. And David didn't deserve to have his world destroyed because of my choices. Living with the secret was torture. David transformed overnight into the devoted, expectant father, reading parenting books with religious dedication, researching the best pediatricians in Chicago, talking excitedly about nursery themes and baby names. He'd placed his hand on my still flat stomach every morning before leaving for work, whispering good morning to our baby. "I never thought I'd be this happy," he told me one evening, his head resting on my shoulder as we looked through baby furniture catalogs. "After all the disappointments, all the negative tests, this feels like a miracle." Each word was a knife in my chest. His complete joy in what he believed was our shared miracle made my deception feel even more monstrous. The physical toll was becoming impossible to hide. Guilt-induced insomnia left me functioning on 2 to 3 hours of sleep per night. Despite being pregnant, I was losing weight everywhere except my growing belly. My skin looked gray. my eyes constantly bloodshot from exhaustion and tears I couldn't shed in front of David. At my 6-week follow-up, the doctor expressed concern about my blood pressure. "Stress can be dangerous during pregnancy," she warned. "You need to find ways to relax. What's causing this level of anxiety?" How could I explain that I was carrying my criminal client's baby while my husband planned our future around a child that wasn't his? That every kind gesture from David felt like betrayal. Every loving word from Marcus reminded me of how deeply I'd compromised my ethics. "Work stress," I lied, adding another deception to the growing pile. The baby began showing at 12 weeks, a small bump that David photographed with the enthusiasm of a professional photographer. He'd started talking to my stomach, telling his child about his day at the hospital, making promises about bedtime stories and weekend trips to the zoo. Meanwhile, I was scheduling secret ultrasound appointments, paying cash for pictures of a child whose father might be spending the next 15 years in federal prison. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. After years of desperately wanting a baby, I was finally pregnant. But the circumstances made it feel more like a punishment than a blessing. My body was creating life, while my lies were destroying everything I'd ever built. The pregnancy that should have brought David and me closer was actually the final wedge between us, even though he had no idea. In just a few more weeks, I'd discover that the worst was yet to come. Marcus's trial was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks when everything I thought I knew about him shattered completely. I'd been working late in my office, 6 months pregnant and exhausted, reviewing the final evidence disclosures from the prosecution. Most of it was material I'd already seen: financial records, email communications, blockchain transaction histories. But buried in the stack was a document that had been misfiled, marked with the wrong case number and nearly overlooked entirely. It was a transcript of a recorded conversation between Marcus and his co-conspirator, dated just 3 months before his arrest. My hand shook as I read the first few lines. This wasn't about money laundering anymore. "The witness is becoming a problem," Marcus's voice, clear and unmistakable on the recording. "She knows too much about the operation, and her testimony could destroy everything. What do you want to do about it?" The second voice belonged to someone the FBI had identified as Vincent Torino, a known associate of organized crime families in Chicago. "Same thing we did with the accountant in Detroit. Make it look accidental." I stopped reading, my pregnant body suddenly cold despite the office heating. I forced myself to continue, hoping I'd misunderstood, that there was context that would explain away what seemed impossible. There wasn't. The conversation continued for 12 more pages, detailing plans to eliminate witnesses who might testify against their money laundering network. They discussed methods, timing, even how to make the deaths appear unrelated to the federal investigation. Marcus wasn't just participating in these conversations. He was leading them. The man I'd fallen in love with, the father of the child growing inside me, wasn't just a white-collar criminal who'd gotten in over his head. He was planning murders. I read the transcript 3 times, searching for any alternative interpretation. Maybe it was taken out of context. Maybe Marcus was being coerced. Maybe the voices had been misidentified. But the technical analysis was conclusive. Voice recognition software confirmed it was Marcus. The conversation was clear, detailed, and showed a level of criminal sophistication that made his claims of innocence laughable. Everything I'd believed about him, about us, about the choices I'd made, it was all built on lies. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. For months, I'd been telling myself that while my affair was wrong, at least I was defending an innocent man. I'd rationalize my professional compromise by believing that Marcus was truly a victim of federal overreach, someone who'd been manipulated by more sophisticated criminals. Now I had to face the reality that I'd destroyed my marriage, my career, and my ethics for someone who was exactly what the prosecution claimed, a dangerous criminal willing to kill to protect his operation. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Just finished painting the nursery. Can't wait to show you when you get home. Love you both." The contrast was nauseating. While I was discovering that my lover was planning murders, my husband was at home preparing for what he believed was our first child together. He'd spent the weekend assembling a crib, hanging pictures of baby animals on freshly painted yellow walls, creating a sanctuary for a child whose biological father might be a killer. I thought about David's excitement that morning as he'd kissed my forehead, his hand resting protectively on my belly. 6 more weeks until we find out if we're having a boy or girl, he'd said. I can't wait to meet our little one. Our little one. The baby he'd been talking to every night, telling stories about his surgeries, promising adventures and unconditional love. David was planning our child's future while I sat in my office, holding evidence that could send the real father to prison for life. The recorded conversation changed everything. If I turned it over to the prosecution, Marcus would face charges far more serious than money laundering. Murder conspiracy, racketeering, possibly life in prison without parole. But if anyone discovered our relationship, I'd be implicated as an accessory, potentially facing criminal charges myself. 3 impossible choices stretched before me, each one leading to catastrophe. I could continue the deception, let David raise Marcus's child as his own, and hope no one ever discovered the truth. But living with this secret was already destroying me physically and mentally, and secrets this massive have a way of surfacing eventually. I could confess everything and watch my marriage, my career, and my family disintegrate in real time. David deserved to know the truth, but the truth would devastate him completely. Or I could disappear, take my unborn child, and start over somewhere else, leaving behind everyone I'd ever loved to protect them from the consequences of my choices. None of these options offered redemption. None of them would undo the damage I'd already caused. And in 3 months, when this baby was born, decisions that seemed impossible now would become unavoidable. The weight of the recorded conversation felt heavier than my pregnancy. I was carrying evidence that could destroy multiple lives, and I had no idea what to do with it. Here I am, sitting in my office at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night, 6 months pregnant and facing the most impossible decision of my life. Marcus's trial starts tomorrow morning. The recorded conversation is sitting on my desk, evidence that could send him away for life, but might also destroy me if anyone discovers our relationship. David is at home right now, probably reading one of his parenting books or organizing the nursery for the 100th time. He's been so excited about becoming a father, so grateful that we finally conceived after years of trying. He has no idea that the child he's preparing to raise belongs to a man who plans murders for a living. The weight of accumulated lies is suffocating. What started as a simple attraction, a minor boundary crossed, has grown into a deception so massive it threatens to crush everyone I claim to love. Each small compromise led to a larger one. Each rationalization made the next betrayal easier to justify. That's the lesson I need you to understand from my confession. We don't wake up one day and decide to destroy our lives. We make small choices, seemingly insignificant compromises that feel manageable at the time. We tell ourselves that just this once we'll bend the rules, just this once we'll prioritize our desires over our principles. But those small compromises are like cracks in a foundation. They seem minor until the entire structure collapses. I convinced myself that taking Marcus's case was about professional growth, that our emotional connection was necessary for effective representation, that one kiss wouldn't hurt anyone, that a secret affair could remain secret. Each step felt reasonable in isolation, but together they created a path to destruction I never saw coming. The baby is kicking now, as if sensing my distress. This innocent life growing inside me is the physical manifestation of every wrong choice I've made. In 3 months, David will be in that delivery room, holding my hand, believing he's witnessing the birth of his child. Marcus will likely be in federal prison, paying for crimes far worse than I ever imagined. And I'll be holding a baby who represents the complete destruction of everything I thought I was, everything I thought I wanted. Tomorrow, I have to make a choice that will determine not just my future, but the futures of everyone involved. The confession I've been avoiding can't be delayed much longer. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when it involves this many lies and this much deception. Tonight, I'm just going to sit here in my office, feeling my baby move, and try to find the courage to tell the 2 most important men in my life that everything they believe about me is built on betrayal. The question isn't whether the truth will come out. The question is whether I'll have the strength to tell it myself, or whether it will destroy us all when someone else reveals what I've been hiding. What would you do in Victoria's situation? Should she confess everything to David, continue living the lie, or disappear with her child? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives help shape these discussions. If you have your own confession story that's been weighing on your conscience, something you've sworn to take to your grave, send it to coffinconfessor111@gmail.com. Your story could be the next one we share, giving you the chance to finally unburden yourself of secrets that are destroying you from the inside. Subscribe if you want to hear more confessions like this. And remember, the choices we make in the shadows eventually come to light. The darkness we think will hide our secrets always gives way to exposure, and the consequences we think we can avoid have a way of finding us when we least expect them. Some secrets are too big to keep forever,